Hello and welcome everyone. We're so thrilled to have you all join us today. I'm Kristen Palma, the president of TargetCancer Foundation. For those of you who are new to the foundation, I just wanted to take a minute to introduce you to TargetCancer and how we got here. TargetCancer was founded in 2009 by my husband, Paul Poth. He was perfectly healthy and a new dad when he was diagnosed at age 38 with cholangiocarcinoma. We knew nothing about that cancer and were shocked first, of course, by a cancer diagnosis, but then by what it meant to have a rare cancer. He soon learned, and I can still remember his oncologist telling us this, that because his cancer was so rare, no one was doing research on it. And because so few people had it, pharma wasn't interested in making a drug for it. It was terrifying to learn that there was no treatment that was meant for his specific cancer. And Paul couldn't believe that in Boston, with the best doctors and scientific minds, that there was nothing that could help him. So while going through treatment after grueling treatment that were really meant for other cancers, he decided to do something to change this and started TargetCancer Foundation. He thought that there must be a drug out there that could help him, but if we just understood his cancer and knew how to find this drug. He made his first donation to the Center for Molecular Therapeutics at Mass General Hospital, but then passed away 2 months later. My brother Jim, who is our amazing executive director, and I decided to continue the foundation, and here we are 12 years later, over $1 million in research grants, and now this exciting and impactful clinical trial, TRACK. You will hear about TRACK and how it works from everyone on the panel today, but very, very briefly, it's a patient-driven, decentralized, precision medicine clinical trial conducted entirely remotely so that rare cancer patients anywhere in the US can participate without having to travel or change their doctor. When a patient enrolls, they provide blood and tissue samples that are sent for genomic testing to Foundation Medicine, our truly phenomenal partner in this study. The reports from the testing are reviewed by our molecular tumor board, made up of esteemed and world-renowned rare cancer experts, including the inspiring women here today. The molecular tumor board then gives individualized treatment recommendations to the patient and their treating physician. I know that Paul would be so thrilled and excited about TRACK because it brings our work at TargetCancer Foundation full circle to his original mission. TRACK helps patients with rare cancers find the treatments that are specific to their cancer and their mutations, and at the same time, it is generating data to help researchers and clinicians treat rare cancers more effectively. It is such an honor to work on this study with all of these incredible women and with the entire molecular tumor board who volunteer their time every week to help rare cancer patients. I want to say thank you to this panel for joining us today, to our project manager, Samantha Sullivan, and to two of TargetCancer Foundation's wonderful volunteers, Abby Alderman and Catherine May, for helping us to plan this. Finally, I'm so pleased to introduce our moderator, Dr. Jennifer Levin Carter. We are so lucky to have Dr. Carter as a member of the TargetCancer Foundation Board of Directors, and she has been an inspiration and a guide for the TRACK study from its first days. Dr. Carter is a precision medicine entrepreneur and executive who has a passion for finding solutions to improve patient care. She is currently a partner at Sandbox Healthcare and the Blue Venture Fund. Prior to her work at Sandbox, she was managing director of JLC Precision Health Strategies. In 2018, she was the founder of Trials Own, and before that was the founder and president of N of One, a global leader in oncology molecular decision support. We're so grateful to have her here with us today. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks so much, Kristen. Really appreciate that introduction. I'm thrilled to be here today and inspired every day by the fabulous work that TargetCancer Foundation is doing to advance treatments and the science for rare cancer. I'd love to introduce to you today our fabulous panel. And I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves, give you a little bit about their background, and then talk to you about what inspires them and what inspired their involvement and dedication to TRACK. So we'll start today with one of the top cancer doctors in the world, Dr. Rizal Kurzrock.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's a real pleasure to be here and to work with you and with Target Cancer, which I think has done a phenomenal job. So just a brief background. I am a medical oncologist that is very interested in precision medicine and especially interested in rare cancers. Rare cancers are individually rare, but in total, they're almost 25% of the current cancer burden. And they're a tremendous unmet need. And I think one that we can really make an impact in now that we have genomic tools. My own background is I trained at MD Anderson Cancer Center, grew up through the ranks, became chair of a phase 1 department that was probably became the largest phase 1 clinical trials department, I think, in the world. I was recruited to University of California, where I led their precision medicine program for almost a decade. And then recently have moved to Medical College of Wisconsin, again, leading the precision medicine program and founding a new rare cancer clinic. So again, real pleasure to work with this really incredible team at Target Cancer.
Thanks so much, Dr. Kurzrock. And now over to Dr. Julia Elvin.
Hi, my name is Julia Elvin, and I am a pathologist. And I am so thrilled to be part of this amazing clinical trial and contribute to the treatment plans for patients with rare cancers around the country. I trained in Houston, Texas at Baylor College of Medicine, where I pursued a PhD in human and molecular genetics. And this is where I developed an interest in the development and tumors of the female reproductive tract. I came to the Boston area to pursue pathology and stayed for a fellowship in women's and perinatal pathology at Brigham and Women's Hospital. I practiced pathology, diagnostic pathology, for about 8 years. And during this time, I recognized both the power of diagnostic medicine, but a number of the limitations of the traditional way that pathology was being applied, particularly to rare cancers and specifically tumors within the female reproductive tract. About 8.5 years ago, I joined Foundation Medicine when we were quite a bit smaller than we are now, to help expand the footprint and availability of precision diagnostics for anybody in the US. And I'm excited that we also now have a global reach with our testing. So thank you very much. And I'll hand it back over to Jennifer.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Dr. Elvin. Catherine, would you like to go next?
Certainly. My name is Catherine Skepis, and I'm a genetic counselor in the Department of Clinical Cancer Genetics at MD Anderson Cancer Center, where I specialize in seeing patients with endocrine tumors and cancers. Before coming to MD Anderson last year, I worked for 2 years at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston. There's a lot of Boston and Houston connection in this group, I've realized. I took a somewhat circuitous path to becoming a genetic counselor. I graduated from Southern Methodist University with degrees in biology and medical anthropology, and then pursued a master's degree in medical anthropology from the University of South Florida, where my research focused on healthcare access and health disparities. But after a few years of working in nonprofit at the American Cancer Society, I decided to go back to school to become a genetic counselor. So I completed my master's degree in genetic counseling at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. And I completed clinical rotations both there and at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis. I've been extremely blessed throughout my career to be in contact with strong female mentors throughout who have really pushed me to get out of my comfort zone and advocate for myself and to say yes to opportunities that come along, like joining the TRAC Molecular Tumor Board, for example. As a genetic counselor, I get to work with patients and their family members who have either a personal or family history of cancer to help them understand the potential genetic or familial implications of their cancer risk. And genetic counselors were trained in both the counseling side of things and the genetics and medical side of things. And so we can help patients and their family members to really understand the results of genetic testing and to adjust to that knowledge of their hereditary cancer risk. This information can be really empowering for patients and helping them to be proactive about their risk and their family members' cancer risk. And that's really a big part of what motivates me every day. My role on the TRAC Molecular Tumor Board is to help identify patients who may benefit from a genetic counseling consultation, either due to their cancer type that they've been diagnosed with, their family history, or the specific results of their molecular testing. And it's really been a joy to work with this team and to learn from each member and their unique specialties and perspectives.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Catherine. Mary, would you like to please give your background and what inspires you?
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I was hoping that pictorially it wouldn't be as evident that I'm the oldest person on the panel, but that's okay, because I think it's going to add value as it relates to why I love what I do, how I got here, and why my passion exists for this. So I too, anyone that sees me with my Celtics or Patriot shirts on from the Boston area, I went to Northeastern University and got a bachelor's of science. While I was there, my internships were with the Beth Israel Deaconess and with Leahy Clinic, who was in Boston at the time. Both of them offered me positions as I graduated, and I accepted the position of manager of research and innovation at Leahy, which really is why I do what I do. I was so lucky and blessed to be exposed to those kinds of things so early on and could understand the opportunities that exist when people with critical thinking and forward thinking, exist and shared that with me. As I evolved into those positions, they asked me to be the director of the research program, which at the time included the clinical research program, which they had about 150 ongoing clinical trials, the animal research program that was really looking at innovation in the animal model as we transitioned it to humans, a simulation center that was one of the first of its kind, in which residents and fellows could come in and simulate what they were going to do before they went to the operating room so that they could get a sense of the reality of timing, what to do, those critical things that made them be aware of what they needed to do technically. And then obviously within all the mentoring and guiding in the operating room, help them facilitate that. So after 25 years of learning and being in an academic center that spent every minute helping you engage and understand what you did, I was recruited. One of the things that Leahy did was work with a commercial IRB, which was the Webb Copernicus group that had a New England market. And what we did together is work with the FDA, DIA, for speakers to come and engage people to understand how important clinical research is and really give examples so people could see what happened again when I was 6, because they let me start working when I was 6. So I'm not really as old as it seems with my experience. They showed you what happened. So New England IRB asked me to be the liaison, the advocate for the New England market in regulatory and commercial experiences for oversight. So I did do that and did consulting, in the background as it relates to my responsibilities of being the IRB chair. One of the people at New England IRB knew that Kristen and Jim were looking for somebody to engage in a research program, and they wanted the infrastructure to be able to make sure that all the data we collected was accurate, that it was based on an operational infrastructure that was similar to those environments. And I think they thought that, and they knew that that was really important to transition from what they were doing and proactively supporting clinical research to actually engage in one that also had remote and all these other kinds of things that never existed before, and how we did it. And I felt like that was like a dream come true for me, to be able to take all the things that everybody had shared with me my entire life and share them with this amazing group at Target, to be able to understand we can help you do what you want to do and get there. And my passion was because for the women on the phone, I know that you understand when someone comes in with a novel idea, and the first time you come in, you go like, oh my God, he must have been drinking last night, but he's telling me this is what we're going to do. We have a robot. Okay, Mary. And the robot's name is Leonardo, which at the time that was the first name of the Da Vinci. Then they went on to name it Da Vinci, is going to come in and he's going to do all our prostate surgeries. A robot? Yeah, a robot's going to come in and he's going to do all this surgery. And you're like, oh, okay. But then you learn why it's safer and why electronically they understand things. They're not, they have, artificial intelligence in the systems that can not touch the nerves of the prostate. So some things that you see post-operatively don't exist, and you are so engaged. And I knew that I could help the Target Cancer Foundation with these information, and to also transition this team in case, I get a little older, can do what I did, because that's what people taught me. All the role models that I had taught me, by teaching you, you are going to be a better part of this team. And that's what we need. And there was nobody that, wanted to be right. They wanted to do the right thing. And I think that was one of the things I learned from the women I work with. There's two different things: being at a meeting and one of being right, or doing the right thing so that everybody gets where they need to be. And I think those were incredibly important lessons. Obviously, being the older person in my life, I saw changes of stereotypes where men were the physicians and men were the CEOs, and all those kinds of things you see that aren't sexist or aren't meant to be penalties. It's that was how life was, that's the person that they perceived could, not have to run home because the kids were sick or drop them off. And I think all of us here have changed that world for everybody, that we can do it the same. I think the things that I struggled with were not unique to Mary. They were like, men didn't seem to have to audition to get the next promotion. You didn't have to prove yourself in the same way that maybe a man could come in, and by virtue of their orientation, they could be perceived to be have more time, or any of those kinds of things. So I, am really excited about being part of this team. I'm excited that it happened, and that they introduced me to being someone that I hope that I can continue to create the infrastructure for track study, other studies, other innovation based on what life gave me. And I was very blessed by the women that I work with that told me I could. You can, Mary, you can do this.
Thanks, Mary. That's a great way to segue into some more discussion about, I think what we're here today to talk about is like what led us all to choose a career in medicine and science, and what are some of those challenges that we have faced as women. We're already started, and please, my encouragement to people in the audience is please send in your questions. Already we're getting some great questions around those types of issues. So, to the fabulous women on this panel, what drove you to pursue this career? What have been some of the challenges you have faced? And what has helped you overcome those challenges and inspired you to persevere in such a way that you're all at the, have created great change and at the top of the field? So let me, I'm going to start with Kristen, and because I think, let's see where I don't know that you had a full chance to give your bio and your background, but why don't you kick us off and get the discussion going, okay?
Sure. Like so many people who come to this work, it was the personal experience, obviously, that brought me here. I was not in science and medicine. That's not my expertise at all, or background, but my work previous to the cancer experience that brought me to Target Cancer Foundation was in victim advocacy for crime victims. So the skills that I learned in that work definitely translate every single day to the work I do here with Target Cancer for Patients and advocating for patients and for better opportunities for medical support and for research. I worked with victims of violent crime and worked in public policy to help promote the laws to protect victims. I worked in youth violence prevention as well. And all of that translates, it amazes me all the time how similar it is. It's advocacy. And I think, you know, we often as women, but also definitely in a rare cancer experience or even a cancer experience, you feel kind of like you're not heard or on the outside, and you have to push and push a little harder and find people and surround yourself with people who are going to stand with you and stand behind you. And luckily in my career before, I had a mentor who guided me and pushed me. And like you said, Catherine, got me out of my comfort zone. And I think, you know, that work and that having a mentor like that allowed me to feel like I could do something completely out of my comfort zone in this work that we do here at Target Cancer Foundation. And I just think, you know, I've been very lucky to be surrounded by women and also other colleagues who just are so supportive every day.
Great. Dr. Kurzrock. Dr. Kurzrock actually has been one of my great mentors in my career. And I've watched her mentor many other women and men who are rising up in their career. And I know when I was an entrepreneur and building N of One, she was incredibly inspirational and helpful in that journey and throughout. And you know, I know that rising up in academic centers. You know, let's sort of think about the academic centers and what that's like and how challenging that is and what's kind of been, who's mentored you and how have you done that and, so successfully, and what continues to drive you to pursue more and more change and change for patients and, change in the industry, in the academic industry, if you will. What's driving you and how have you done that? So. I think you're on mute.
Jennifer, thank you. Actually, I consider you as a mentor with your entrepreneurial spirit. But yeah, so I actually don't know the answer. I've really loved science since I was a child, and I'm one of the few people probably that knew what they wanted to do when I was 6 years old. And I used to hide science books under my desk, and my classmates called me the scientist, and they did not mean that in a complimentary fashion. I guess if you love dance, you love dance. And if you love science, you love science. I went into oncology at a time that it was pretty bleak. And, people would ask me, why oncology? Why not a mortician? Which was really a terrible question. But my answer to them was that I believed cancer would change in my lifetime, and I wanted to be part of that. And I have to say that it was kind of slow the first few years. But I think over the last 10 to 15 years, we've really begun to see it's nothing short of a revolution in cancer. And this has really been driven, I believe, by being able to sequencing the genome, looking at RNA, really being able to not guess what is wrong with a tumor, but really understand what is wrong with a tumor in a way that was almost unimaginable 15 years ago. And so we are seeing, I don't want to overpromise or overhype, but we now can see responses in patients that we never would have believed would respond. And it's not because we're guessing, it's because we understand the underpinnings of that tumor. So if you want to ask what's driven me, It's the science and making a difference for patients. I also want to say that I think being a woman in science, I would perceive the playing ground is not level in my experience, and I would have hoped it would become more level over my lifetime, and it has. But I definitely think that it's still not level, and I've had many experiences that speak to that, so I think that that's another aspect that I didn't go into thinking about it, but I would really like to help other women move forward, especially talented women that should be moving forward. So that's another motivation that I don't think I went into the field initially with that additional motivation, but for me now that actually has become quite important as well. You're on mute.
Sorry. So Dr. Alvin, I see you nodding, and I think what's interesting is sort of to think about the contrast. I think I've got lots of questions coming in. I think folks are looking at different ways to build their career, right? And you have that the industry side, right? And so in your experience, how have you found sort of the parallel experiences or different experiences, and your feelings of being the woman in the room, and how that's played out and how you've gotten to where you've gotten.
Oh, so many thoughts are rushing through my mind at this moment. Thoughts kind of hearkening back to when I was in high school and the role that a few key women played in just exposing me to what was possible. I credit Miss Thomas, my AP chemistry teacher, and Miss Scott, my AP biology teacher, who recognized the power of recombinant DNA technology that was just emerging at that time and brought it into our high school science laboratory. And that got me hooked. I knew I wanted to do something in biotechnology. I was fascinated by molecular genetics. I have to admit, I had a little bit of a mad scientist notion in my mind at that time about how that might play out. But eventually I found myself pursuing medicine and an MD PhD with the idea that I could take advantage of the concept of bench to bedside to help iterate both on the technology and that was available at the time, and push its usefulness, or find a translational way to utilize some of the things we were learning in the laboratory. And pathology, the field of medicine, pathology and diagnostic medicine, provided me that perfect combination of the ability to both practice and see and learn the problems that patients and clinicians were facing, the questions that they wanted answers to, and then to be able to go back and understand the technology that either was present or emerging at the time. So I followed a fairly traditional academic educational model through my fellowship, and then decided that I wanted to actually go out and implement or utilize the skills I had learned in the field, as a practicing pathologist. And one of the things that Dr. Kurzrock said that really resonated with me is during those 8 years, I was still watching the technology and developments that were coming out for different areas of oncology. And this is where I started to realize that there were areas of advancement and progress that were happening for certain patients, and other patients were being left behind in the dust. And specifically, during this time, there was a lot of advancement in the area of lung cancer, where the survival for metastatic lung cancer previously had been on the order of months. And in a very short period of time, in a span of a couple of years, those expectations had dramatically changed, so that patients were living multiple years. And now, excitingly, with the help of precision medicine and molecular diagnostics, folks are actually living sometimes decades with their diagnosis. Being a specialist in gynecologic pathology, and being the one that was looking down the microscope to diagnose ovarian cancer and endometrial cancer and cervical cancer, I was really not only disappointed, but started to realize that this way of approaching women's cancers was just not doing justice to these women, and that I needed my dissatisfaction at the progress that was happening in that field was not enough, but that I needed to actually change directions and join a company like Foundation Medicine, where I could bring both my expertise, but also the questions and my passion for women's malignancies, and bring that into the conversation to ensure that those tumors also benefited from this technology. So when I arrived, and to your point, how have I seen the challenges in this phase, for a female physician in industry? I was one of the few women in a technical or leadership role when I first started. However, I was actually really, really fortunate. There were a number of other women who were strong PhDs and MDs in the company at the time that mentored me and also supported the idea of broadening the conversation to women's malignancies. I think that I've been extremely fortunate to find my way to mentors of all types, both male and female mentors along the way, that have encouraged me, and I think have provided that can-do sort of kick in the pants sometimes when times are getting tough, to ensure that I recognized the importance of my role in the whole process, and followed through on the vision that I had here.
I raised so many interesting questions, and I see everyone nodding. Mary and Catherine, there are a couple questions that I'd like to tie together here, just in the spirit of time, and also really shifting towards some of the questions that the audience is asking. But one of the things that stands out is this question of, if you're in the room with, if you're in a room where you're the one female voice or one of few female voices, sometimes it's hard to get heard, and your voice is difficult to be respected, and sometimes credit is given to a male coworker, and I think that ties into the question of how you think about bias, and how you think about overcoming bias. Is that bias, or does that happen to everybody? at certain times? And how do you put that in a context and keep building and keep moving? And we talked a bit about that as we were preparing, and I think that's a theme that is coming up frequently in some of the questions. So I think it'd be great to think and address that. So, I'd love to go around the room quickly and get some opinions here. And so let me start with Mary on that. And I'm sure in the IRB and regulatory world and clinical trial world, you've seen plenty of that. So
I have. I think there's a couple of things that I learned is that what you have to do differently than men probably is gain a reputation of being your authentic self and trustworthy, and not, you have to get them somehow to understand that what your role is, that they feel comfortable that your role is, that you have that capacity. I think different than other opportunities, that there is a preconceived notion or perception that you don't know as much, or because you're balancing your work and your family, that you don't have the time to do things to the other level that somebody else has to. I think that one thing that you have to do is gain the respect that what you do is at a really high level. And I do think that there continues to be a disparity between working at the highest level to get where you need to be versus maybe a male person in the same position just has to be good enough. And I think that perception has gotten better, and I think that stereotype has gotten better, but I still think that there is a preconceived notion that a male has more capacity or has more time and those kinds of things. So I think for me, it was really being somebody that was willing to learn, being somebody to share and my ideas, and then to push them, and ask them why we're not going to do it without being provocative. But could you just explain to me, why you don't think that's a good idea, or why it was wrong? Because I'd like to be able to, reshape how I feel about that. So I do think that we have to, and we still continue to, as Dr. Kurzrock said, continue to navigate things. We still shouldn't be doing this. We still shouldn't be auditioning for me 40 years later, but that is our reality. And maybe, some of my colleagues have a better idea about how to, earn that competitive, equal respect in a workforce. Catherine, you're looks like you're next on the window.
Catherine, you look like you were going to say something.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm happy to chime in. So I've been extremely fortunate that I haven't specifically experienced what the person wrote in the question, which was, someone else sort of taking credit or speaking over you, that sort of thing. But one thing that I have encountered often is not being the only female voice, but being the only voice in my specialty in meetings. And that's something that I've had to do, I think, more internal work on to consider myself the expert in the room. That's something that I've struggled with, especially as a newer genetic counselor, acknowledging that, yes, based on my training, I do know more about this specific topic than the other people that I'm talking with right now. And so that's something that I've really worked with colleagues that are in a similar position as mine to, talk through, how do I deal with this imposter syndrome? How do I speak confidently? And much of that has come with following up on things that I don't know about when I say I will. Not being afraid to say, I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I will find out, and then truly finding out and following up with that to establish that credibility, much like Mary was talking about. Mm-hmm. So I feel that, much of my struggles have been more internal, I guess you could say, than external in building that confidence, acknowledging and accepting myself as an expert and building on that expertise.
That's great. Kristen, you're nodding too. Do you have, from your experience, something to add there? I'm sure.
Well, I think I can echo everything that everyone has said, and it just has made me think a lot about this track study and just the whole, I think so much of the motivation for it was leveling the playing field and bringing people in who aren't usually heard, whether it's, it wasn't specifically male or female, but it was, patients who aren't getting the same level of attention or treatment or getting access to the knowledge and the treatment opportunities that patients maybe in Boston or places like Houston would be, just because of where they are. And I think, whenever you're designing any kind of project like this, to always have that in your mind, that leveling the playing field, bringing everyone in, is just one way to really counter some of these biases, like you said, that come in everywhere. So it's been something that's really motivated us, and I've really loved seeing it in practice with TRACK. Is just patients from all over the country, all different types of community settings and hospitals that would never get this level of expertise. So it's been really exciting. So a little bit different than what you asked, but just made me think of that.
No, that's perfect. I mean, it's an exciting part of it. And I want to come back to that in a second, to refocus on TRACK. But a couple questions here, and I think it's really relevant, is how do you find a mentor? How do you find that person? Can you be intentional about it? And if there's not one in your current position, how do you go, or your current role, how do you go do that? So Julia, you're nodding, and love to hear your thoughts on that.
So as I said, there are people who entered my life unexpectedly, who mentored me along the way, who I give a lot of credit to for developing particular skills or particular areas of confidence. I was thinking about the imposter syndrome that Catherine brought up, and yeah, I have suffered from that, and I suffer from it not infrequently, even today, particularly in a field such as precision medicine, where we kind of are out on not just the leading edge, but the bleeding edge of technology and medicine. So there is this fine line between recognizing that you're a pioneer and that you're at the edge of what is known and unknown, versus that feeling of whether you should know more, and whether you are really an expert. I particularly remember that from my PhD, and that gave me quite an interesting perspective when you study something in so much depth, that you do at the end recognize that really nobody in the world knows as much as you do about that particular topic, and that mainly what it means is where the limit of understanding is. So that is, I think that imposter syndrome piece is very common. And so I have looked for mentors that have put themselves in a similar situation to understand and to develop that internal sense of expertise at the edge of knowledge. And so this has been a combination, sometimes women, sometimes male colleagues. Definitely credit Dr. Kurzrock for who I've interacted with in my position here at Foundation Medicine as a pathologist since the very beginning, and have watched the way she handles particularly individual patient cases, where we struggle with the idea of wishing that we could have all of the answers before we go forward, and yet recognizing you have to make a decision and you have to go forward with the information that you have. And that has been incredibly powerful and impactful to me in my recent career development.
Great. Dr. Kurzrock, you know, again, I think that you're one of the leading mentors that I know, but I would love to hear about, you know, your thinking about mentorship and you know, just, I mean, I'll just leave it at that. So.
Yes, I want to address a few things there, and I thank Julia for the compliment. I don't know that I deserve it, but at any rate, I think that mentorship for me is a newer concept that I didn't think existed when I was younger. In fact, I would say I had a lot of D-mentors, but I had to have a new word. But now,
I like that word. That's
yeah,
great.
D-mentors. But I think that if I learned anything, it's not that it's straightforward. And some of the people that helped me the most were not intuitively the best people. So that is one of the, and I'll give you an example. Emil Freireich, who was one of the giants of cancers, and he was kind of known as a pretty sexist guy. But I think he helped me maybe more than anybody else in the end. So I don't think it's all that straightforward. And so I think if one wants to find a mentor, it's a good idea to see who that mentor has worked with and how successful those people have been, because I think that reflects on the mentor. Now, of course, it's a two-way street, but I do think that's important. And then I do want to address something, because there was an anonymous attendee that wrote something, and I just wanted to validate what they wrote. It was in the chat, but it says, I find in group discussions with my male coworkers, I have to repeat myself several times before anyone really hears what I'm saying. And frequently my ideas are credited to my male coworkers. It's happened many times now. And as I move up in my role, it's becoming more and more of an issue. Have you ever had this problem? Do you have any advice? So I just wanted to tell whoever wrote that I could have written that. I mean, I didn't, but I could have. And I wish I could say that I could have written it 20 years ago and not, 2 months ago. But I do think it's an ongoing problem in academics. I'm not even sure I know what to do about it. But I did want to sort of validate this thing that was written in the chat. And I'll also say that I think it becomes more of a problem as you go up the leadership ladder, that it's actually less of a problem when you're a young faculty and not a leader. It becomes more of a problem. And when I've spoken to other women, they've sort of said the same thing. As they go up the leadership ladder, this becomes more of a problem. So I think things have changed for women in academics, but maybe they haven't changed as much as I would have liked to see during my lifetime. But my lifetime's not over, so we're still going. So I hope that answered some of the questions.
Thanks. That's great. One of the things that came up quite a bit when we were, chatting before the panel, before today, was thinking about resilience. And, I think that's such an important word and something that, that we could spend just a minute talking about, given the questions that we're seeing, in terms of, how do you get noticed for a job application? How do you find a mentor? How do you rise? How do you keep rising up in your career? So, that was a theme that we talked a little bit about in prep. So, if, I see, Catherine, I see you nodding your head. Would you like to, talk a little bit about how you think about that?
Yeah, and my thought about this actually sort of relates to the last question about identifying a mentor too. I think a big part of my success in getting into my chosen field and things like that was sort of trying as much as possible to brush off the negativity and pursue the experiences that I thought I needed to get where I wanted to go. For example, when I was in college, before I had even discovered the field of genetic counseling, I had a professor tell me how disappointed my parents must have been that I didn't want to go to medical school. And it's like, well, that's not helpful feedback at all. I know I don't want to be a doctor, but I need some other ideas here. I need some help in trying to figure out what it is that I want to do, not saying, oh, well, you should have just gone to medical school. And I think, along those lines, being able to move past that and realize, no, this really isn't the right choice for me. I need to explore those different options and see what is. And then in finding people who are where you want to be and not being afraid to reach out to them and figure out how they got there, I think is the other important component there. And as I was preparing to apply to genetic counseling school, I realized I wanted to get some additional experience working in a lab because that wasn't something that I had done before. And so I just started sending out emails to people, to PIs working at the local university, and literally asking, can I shadow you? Can I clean your test tubes? Can I do something to get some exposure to this part of the field that I haven't had exposure to yet? And I was so lucky that out of all of the no's, one person said yes. And what started as a day of shadowing turned into a job for a few months as I was preparing to apply to school. And so a big part of resilience for me comes in not getting discouraged with the no's, not getting discouraged with not quite knowing what I wanted to do, and still trying to figure that out to get to the right place in my life.
That's great. And a call out from someone in the audience is just to mention that, there's an organization called the Healthcare Business Women's Association. And, I know a number of women who are in that. It's a great place to network and meet other women. But I think that's those types of organizations and places where people gather with similar interests are other places that you can expand your experience, your exposure, and the connectivity that you have in the industry. Shifting back in our last few minutes to the TRACK study, there have been a number of questions around, how do we could create a sustainable model around rare cancers, around virtual tumor boards, around making what TCF has begun to create, a bigger and more replicable model for more and more patients. And I know this is near and dear to all of our hearts on the panel. So, let me start with Dr. Kurzrock on that, and then we'll go quickly around. We have 5 more minutes, and then I'll hand it, and I'll let Kristen come in at the end and close with a few words, a few final words there.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. I think that TargetCancer and TRACK, the study and the organization has created an absolutely unique study. And as you mentioned it, I would hope that it's a platform for additional studies. It is not easy to operationalize a national genomic study where patients are treated at home. And it's actually a phenomenal undertaking. And yet TargetCancer did that. And so I'd like to give credit to Kristen and Jim. They just operationalized it. And it's not just that the science is difficult. Everybody talks about the science, but it's actually getting the study up and running. Because you can do great science, but if you can't get a study like this up and running, the science doesn't impact patients. And I think that this is a great model in so many ways. It's rare cancers. I don't know the number of patients consented already, but I think it's probably someplace around 150, which is pretty phenomenal. And the molecular tumor board is working. And I hope it's a platform for additional studies. There's so much to do in this field. And like I said, almost 25% of the cancer burden in the country is rare. So that's an enormous burden that could be impacted. There's whole fields of immunotherapy and so forth. So I hope it's a model for additional studies, either from TargetCancer or other organizations.
That's great. You know what, we're running out of time, but Mary, do you have 2 words? Because you're on the operational side there with the IRB and some of the
I
work.
do. I think
Yeah.
what TRAC did, and it was not intentionally to demonstrate one way or the other. I think as we talk about men and women in this platform, I think what TRAC did is subtly tell people they own what happens to them. So I think this study doesn't just send a letter to a physician. This study allows the patient to understand the thoughts and the recommendations, that you own the decision with your treating oncologist. We're sending them that information because we're experts in the field, and we want to take our expertise and bring it home to you. We want you to own what you do. We want you to feel a peace of mind that those recommendations can be entertained by you in a discussion with your physician, and you own it and you treat it. And I think that's an amazing thing. And I think as women, that's what we do. We have not only changed philosophically what it's like to be a woman in business, but what it looks like. And we are changing what it looks like to get precision medicine, to get these recommendations, and to be part of resulting it and taking charge of your cancer.
That's
I
fabulous.
would like to just add one
Yeah.
comment to this, which is the frustration for me prior to being part of this study is honestly, it's ignorance of the tools that are out there that you can access. People who know me well still call me up and say, who do I need to know in order to get genomic testing? And I say, you don't. This is now available widely and is moving towards, it's already standard of care for many, many tumors, and it should be standard of care for all of them. So what I think has been amazing about the TRAC study is actually reinforcing the access and the information to patients themselves to ask their treating physicians to do better and to know more and have better information to help guide their decisions.
Fabulous. I could personally stay on this panel all day, and I'm honored to be part of it. Let me turn it back to, thank you all, and let me turn it back to Kristen to close us out. So.
And thank you so much, Jen, for moderating and just being such a supporter of our work since our first days, really. We're so grateful. And I don't know if anyone else has anything to add. I want anyone to jump in if they do, but I think, just what I was thinking was, as a cancer caregiver, patient caregiver, as having gone through the experience of a rare cancer, you're just so used to hearing no, to everything. And just what Mary was saying, Catherine was saying, everyone has said here today. I think the importance of recognizing what the need is, what an unmet need, and that's what we did with this study. Patients do it all the time. Advocates, family members are constantly trying to advocate for themselves. And I think what we tried to do with TRAC was just to find that need for rare cancer patients and address it in some way where they will have some control and hear some yeses. It doesn't mean it's the end answer. We're working towards that, but I can say the outlook and the changes since my experience with my husband, Paul, to today it's a completely different situation, completely different. And, we have a long way to go, but I think having good people around you. We could not have done this by ourselves. And you can see, everyone who's watching this can see today, this incredible group who make this trial work every week. We could not do it without all of these different expertises. And, you know, it was something that sounded a little crazy and people weren't sure if it could work, and we just did it anyway. So, you know, that's, I think, what you have to do is find the unmet needs and really push the envelope a little bit. And that's how, you know, what we're doing, and we're going to continue to do with TRACK. I saw someone say, what's next? I mean, we're still in the middle of the trial. We have, we're going to be enrolling 400 patients. But as we're going, we're finding more areas to address, and we hope that there will be TRACK 2.0 and TRACK 3.0. So there's a long way to go and a lot to do, and we're just really excited to have this opportunity. And anyone else who wants to jump in quick before we wrap up? I know it's after 1, but please do.
My hope is that we don't have to have a TRACK 4.0, that what this leads to is a overhaul of the way everybody approaches cancer, so that every patient, when they go speak with their doctor, gets what the patients on the TRACK trial are getting here. And this is going to lead the way. And I really, really commend Kristen and the other folks with this organization for having that vision, to be dissatisfied and to do something about it.
Thank you, Julia, and everyone. This has been so exciting. I hope we can do this again. It's really nice to be able to take a moment like this just to talk about, you know, what means so much to us. So thank you everyone for attending, and to all the panelists for sharing all of your expertise. If anybody has questions that didn't get answered, you can always email us at TargetCancer, and we will try to get them answered for you. And always excited to hear feedback and your ideas. So thanks to everyone for joining today.
Thank you.
See you guys at the Schumer board at 4.
See you in a couple
Bye-bye.
hours.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.